I want to talk about something that I have not talked about like on my channel in quite a while. I made one video on veganism a while back and kind of animal rights. And this video was sent to me and kind of like brought to my attention. And like, I agree with this video in general, but at the same time, veganism is not something that like I've just overly talked about or made a focus on my channel, even though I'm a vegan and I definitely want to talk about vegan ethics. So temporarily, just bear with me if you can, I would like to talk about veganism. So this is the video I was referring to, right? Let's watch this video first, and then we're going to talk about it.
And the left-wing position to its logical conclusion, it should lead to veganism. Because what is the progressive position? Anti-oppression, anti-discrimination, protection of rights, but somehow it only stops at human rights. I would consider myself a leftist and a progressive, and I follow a lot of progressive political channels and people, and I don't know any of them to be vegan or ever talk about the issues of animal rights because they're not vegan, so they're not going to talk about the animal rights issue, even though logically speaking.
I want to just stop it for a second. I don't think that leftist content creators, I don't know which ones of them are vegan and which ones aren't. And there's an entire, I know there's a joke about vegans. It's like, how do you know if someone's a vegan? Trust me, they will tell you, right? That's a joke that I've heard numerous times. I don't think it's that leftist content creators are majority. I mean, like maybe they're not vegan, but we don't know for sure. Some of them I hear like, you know, mention veganism or mention that they like are on a plant-based diet as like an offhanded comment, but they don't make videos doing that kind of activism, because the issues that you're bringing up when you say like, oh, they're, you know, they're arguing for leftist progressive issues like fighting oppression and that sort of stuff. If they're making political content, they're usually doing what I'm doing, like talking about ICE, or they're saying, hey, you know, here are two people that are kind of like ideologically opposed to each other. They did a debate. We're going to react to it. Here's what the president did, etc. When you're talking about veganism, we're talking about like advocating for animal rights. Obviously, that is going to be part of like a political agenda. But veganism is also just an ethical position on what are your stances on animal ethics. It might not be that you're going to put focus into, you know, arguing. Now, I think you should. I've made a video on veganism myself. And at the time that I made the video, I was kind of, I don't know, I was a little disappointed with kind of the way that I articulated that video. So maybe I'll get a chance to kind of like offer another perspective this time around. But I do want to let her finish what she's saying on this, and then kind of talk about why this came up in the first place besides just this video.
It should lead to anti-animal oppression. So if you consider yourself to be a leftist and you believe in anti-oppression and you believe in protecting rights of those that are weaker even, why does it stop at human beings?
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of times people feel like we talk about veganism when people ask us what we eat. Yeah, 100%. So I want to just get to why this came up in the first place. So a couple of days ago, I was having some discussion in a public Discord, and I was chatting with some people, and the subject of veganism came up. And a lot of people there already know that I'm a vegan, so they asked me some, you know, some things on about being vegan, etc. And somebody had asked me like, well, why did you become vegan in the first place? And I became vegan over maybe like a year. It was like a year and a half process, right? I started just reducing the amount of meat that I was eating. I started to become more concerned about animal rights, because I started thinking that like, if I take animal abuse serious and I'm seriously opposed to animal abuse, then why am I only applying those standards to dogs and cats and to cute animals that I like? You know, if I had, you know, favorite animals that I would see like at the zoo, or animals that were, I thought were obviously are worthy of conservation. I know it's cringe now, But that's how I viewed it back then. I was like, oh yeah, of course, dolphins and whales, like we absolutely should, we should conserve those animals. Let's just go full camera. I felt like we should conserve those animals, and they absolutely like deserved it. Like, as opposed to some animals that I would view as like animals that were used as food product. And I had a cognitive dissonance that it's okay to eat those animals, but it ought not be okay to eat like dogs and cats and stuff like that, because people would say like, well, in some countries they eat dogs and cats, and I would be I'd be repulsed by that. And then, or I would hear like some countries like eat horses, and I was horrified at that. I was like, no, why are you eating horses? Like, horses are like wonderful creatures. Why would you use them for food? But then I started, wrestling with the fact that like, well, pigs are wonderful animals too. Like, if you've ever been around pigs, if you've ever seen them like playing and stuff like that, they are like adorable. But at the time, you said that you just had to talk about recently as work got lunch for everyone, and when they saw us check what was in there, they asked, they see that and they think it's all we talk about. They expect us to never talk about our diet, as they can talk about their favorite foods as much as they want. Yeah, no, 100%. A lot of times when you're like with like carnists or omnivores, a lot of times they'll say like, oh, how much they love like tacos, or they're going to order for lunch, and I'm going to say, oh, pizza, yeah, let's get pizza, and that sort of thing. But if you mention like, oh yeah, I really love soy curls, or I really enjoy this vegan curry or something like that, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're being political. It's kind of like if somebody's talking about their sexuality, or they're talking about their struggles and what it's like to be like with like gender issues, and when they ask you about it, you're like, well, my experience with gender or my experience with sexuality is also through the lens of like being trans. They're like, oh, now you're politicizing it. Like, before we were just having a good conversation, and now you've gone and made it political. And I feel like they do the same thing with veganism, where it's like they want to just openly talk about the foods that they enjoy. But if you mention the foods that you enjoy, now you're politicizing dinner, essentially. When in actuality, this is just like an ethical stance that we have. But I want to stay focused on the story real quick. So at the time, my wife and I were truck drivers, and we drove like all over the country, and we ended up seeing a lot of the conditions that these animals were being kept in. And I would end up seeing like, cattle ranchers. I end up seeing like trucks hauling chickens, trucks hauling pigs, trucks hauling cows. And I'd be at like the gas pumps and stuff like that, and sometimes these animal haulers would park next to us, and I could like see the pigs in there through like the slats in the walls of the trailer, and like sometimes they would see you and start following you a little bit, and then they would like look up at where the latch was on the door, and they'd start like nuzzling the latch or stick their nose out, like they know where the latch is. They know how to get out, like where the exit is. And it's like I could see the fear in their eyes. And sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional here. That had a definite impact on us. And so we started reducing the amount of like meat that we were eating, because like we knew that it was like, okay, we don't want to eat cows, we don't want to eat pigs anymore. Not after seeing like what was happening to them. And it was like, but it seemed like birds were still enough removed from being mammals that I could like still be like, okay, well, I'm not going to eat cows, I'm not going to eat pigs, but I'm going to eat chicken. I'll still eat chicken, and I'll still eat seafood, because they are, removed from being mammals enough that I was like, I think this is like, I'm okay ethically here. Like, I think I'm going to ethically draw the line at mammals. But then, I started like getting more interested in ethics just in general. And the more I started reading about ethics, the harder it was for me to justify, like, why am I making the cutoff line at mammals? And then I eventually got, a book written by Peter Singer. It was from the 70s. The book is called Animal Liberation: A New Ethics for Our Treatment of Animals. And I read through this book, and I know that Singer has said since then that he was disappointed with how like seemingly little impact the book seemed to have had when he released it. But I can say that for sure that reading that book, that was like the last straw for me to become vegan. You know, that was the last domino that I needed to read the philosophy on it and read the arguments that he laid out and the treatment of these animals that I had to grapple with. Like, I cannot justify drawing the line at mammalian life and not care about like poultry or fish. And recognizing that dissonance was there, you know, I began unpacking those ethical views. And that's what convinced me ultimately to become a vegan. And I know some people will say like, well, philosophical arguments don't really move people. And I'm like, no, it moved me. Like, you know, obviously I saw the suffering of these animals, and that was enough to get me to stop wanting to eat some of them. But the philosophical positions and kind of like grappling with that moved us to no longer consume any animal products whatsoever. And I've been a vegan for like 6 years at this point. I do think that, you know, she had a point in the video that if we're talking about oppression and we're going to say like, hey, we've got to call out like the genocide in Gaza. We need to, you know, call out ICE for their human abuses. We need to, you know, protect migrants. Obviously, like I believe in like trans and queer rights. We want this liberation, and we want, you know, freedom for ourselves and freedom for these other groups of people. But at the same time, like, I mean, we can work on more than one thing at a time. I don't want to say like, unless there's some perfect solution to this, then we just can't acknowledge it whatsoever. And I feel like we ought acknowledge people in the political sphere. We ought acknowledge the suffering of animals more often than we talk about it. And like for a while, I've not really been doing vegan activism, like unless you count being vegan as some form of activism in and of itself. And like I would pretty much only invoke it when people asked me about it, or if it came up and people were like, oh, well, you know, vegans X, Y, and Z. I would in the conversation usually be like, well, I'm a vegan, so like what do you want to talk about? And I mean, there are some annoying conversations that I've had as well. I'll just like kind of touch on a couple of topics that I get a little annoyed about. And I know if I say, oh, I get annoyed about this, people just like spam me with this stuff, but whatever. I mean, like, so many knuckleheads have said these sorts of things that like at this point, I don't care if people say this stuff. So literally, I also have the chat box up. There you go. There's the chat. Sorry about that. I accidentally had it. I had it behind my overlay. But I get frustrated whenever I'm talking about vegan ethics and somebody will bring up plants. And, oh, well, what about plants? And it's like, plants aren't even sentient, right? It's like when you're asking about like ethical veganism, the main concern is for like sentient creatures. Now you could say, well, doesn't that just reduce down into sentientism or something like that? Okay, fine. Maybe it does. Right? Because I feel like if I saw that there was some plant matter and this plant was sentient and this plant had consciousness, or this plant was, you know, motivated, had its own goals, its own reasoning, and it like took actions to try and reach those goals, I would be like, yeah, we shouldn't kill and eat that plant. In the same way that like if an alien from outer space came down, I would be like, hey, that alien is not even life from Earth. But it's sentient. Therefore, I would say we should apply the same principles, and we ought to treat them with like some basic dignity. We ought not like kill them and eat them just because we have like a taste for flesh or something like that. And I know that this is just not going to be a popular segment. I know that a lot of people they feel like it's just moralizing, but no, I'm being serious. Vegans are right. If you're not a vegan, I understand that might make you uncomfortable. It might cause some cognitive dissonance in you. Like I used to have cognitive dissonance before being a vegan. But at the same time, I'm saying if you care about animals, if you care about animal abuse, if you actually want to reduce harm to animals, the only logical conclusion is veganism if you follow that through. Now, it's not my fault if you have roadblocks that you can't overcome, or you're like, well, I just have such a strong taste preference for cheese or something, when it's like, no, they make cheeses you can eat. Like any food you can imagine that carnists eat, you can make that food vegan. And this is just something that people culinarily haven't seen in our society, because a lot of cooking shows and that type of thing. Like I remember Gordon Ramsay like shitting on vegans and mocking vegans and that type of thing, and mocking vegan food. But then years later, after he visited a pig slaughterhouse, he ended up saying after that he understood why people were vegan. Cannot stress that enough. Until you see it, it's difficult to even convey how these animals are like treated. And it's sorry to get emotional. It's difficult to think of the amount of suffering that they're enduring, than people to say, oh, well, to minimize this and be like, well, I like hamburgers, or I like pork chops, or something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, stop saying that you don't, that you're against animal abuse, because like you're having such a selective preference for animals at that point that I can't take you serious. It'd be like saying, oh, I have an ethical stance against like the suffering of children or something like that. But then like you specifically go out of your way to buy like the byproduct that's made from somebody slaughtering kids. And like, I'm sorry, but no, you clearly don't care about this, because you're willing to buy the byproduct of them. Now, some people might say something like, oh, but you own an iPhone, and iPhones are made from exploitation, or something like that. At the end of the day, capitalism itself is exploitation, and just going about your life is like almost, it's unavoidable interacting with capitalism. But like, that's a slippery slope. You don't have to buy every single product. Like there are some products that might have been made with more suffering or more exploitation than others. And there might be a line that you ethically draw to say, I'm not going to buy this product because like I know about it. But at the end of the day, none of us have perfect knowledge. I don't know which iPhone company is more, or which, phone company is more exploitative than another. I don't know, which one of these like factories that produce like coca, I don't know which ones of those are more exploitive than another. Now you could say, oh, but Zoe, if you were serious about ethics, then you would know all of this. You can't know everything. But the vegan subject, it's at such a surface level. It's so obvious what the products are. The products are the ones made from the slaughtered parts of animals. That's it. You don't have to do a bunch of investigation. You don't have to go read political philosophy to understand like how they're being harmed. It is self-evident that you're buying body parts. You're buying blood and viscera. Like, yeah, they were harmed in making that. And just to kind of curtail, since we touched on harm, because harm was brought up to me by one of the other people, and they would say, oh yeah, but if you essentially found a way to painlessly kill them, like, you used a nail gun or something like that, not a nail gun, but you used a bolt gun, and you were able to instantly kill them, would that make it ethical since they didn't suffer when you kill them? And at the end of the day, first of all, I don't know how you're going to prove or demonstrate that there's no suffering when they died. And you're still violating their bodily autonomy and their bodily integrity. That's what I care about more than anything else, right? I care about whether you're violating autonomy and their bodily integrity more so than just a vague concept of suffering. If I had to narrow it down philosophically, like those are at the heart of it. I care about treating them fairly, and I care about treating them with justice. And no animal has done anything to deserve to be put in a slaughterhouse. And in no way, shape, or form could you ever derive justice from what's being done to these animals in these slaughterhouses.